What's up, degenerates? This is locked in. Well, hold on. I have an echo. Business as usual, always technical difficulties. We're good now. What's up, degenerates? This is locked in. I'm your host, Mason Cameron at PFF underscore Mace on the Twitter. And with me, as always, my partner in crime, Vishaal Gupta at Vishaal underscore Gupta 95 on Twitter. V, what's up? How you doing? How you living? We have the holiday slate on tap this week. It's been a long season to get here, but we have some crazy good games on the slate this week. How you feeling? How you living?
Doing good. Excited for the holiday season coming up, and yeah, it should be a great week of football. A couple games on Saturday, normal slate on Sunday, and then we got our nice triple header on Monday for Christmas. So it should be a fun few days of football.
Yeah, football every single day. We can't get enough football. Thanks for the gift of football, NFL. We really appreciate it. I can't wait to see how they shoehorn in more games on Christmas Day and Christmas Eve. They couldn't be happier of how the slate continues to fall on the weekend for them. Um,
Yep.
and, so are we. So we get to break down the games this week. And business as usual, we start off by breaking down the Thursday night matchup this week. We had the Saints go in to LA to take on the Rams. The Rams 4-point favorites at close. Game total on this one 45 and a half. Rams 30, Saints 22. Rams cover the 4 over 45 and a half. 52 total points. There was 15 points in the fourth quarter by New Orleans to make this over happen. For the Rams, Kyron Williams, Puka Nacua had great games. Kyron went down for a little bit, came back. Everybody was worried about that. He should be good to go moving forward. But wow, what a game from Puka Nacua. That was incredible. The spread implications for this game, Rams 9-5-1 now, tied for the best record in the league against the spread. 5 straight covers over in 4 of their last 5. On the other hand, the Saints not doing so hot. 4-10-1, one of the worst against the spread records in the league. They are 2-4 in their last 6 against the spread, in 1-2 as dogs this year. This is something we talked about a few weeks ago, that I'm surprised that they've only been dogs just a few times this season. I think that just shows the level of competition they've gone up against. And frankly, to only have a 7-8 record is a little troubling for them. Uh, yeah. So, what did you make of this matchup, V? Was anything out here surprising? I think a lot of everybody considered the Rams a much better team than the Saints. I didn't expect this game to go over quite like it did, but what were you expecting from this matchup?
Well, just I was really curious to see if the Rams could continue what they've been doing offensively over the last few weeks, ever since they kind of got healthy on that side of the ball. Stafford had a bit of an injury; he was out for a game or two. Cooper Cup missed some time. Nakua was battling some injuries. Kyron Williams missed some time. All those guys seem to be back fully 100% over the last couple of weeks, and we've seen that they've dominated some teams, whether that's Arizona or Cleveland, or having a nice game against Baltimore. So I was very curious to see if they can continue that coming into Thursday night short week, and kind of prove that they're a legit playoff team. And they 100% did it. Stafford is playing out of his mind right now. Continues to throw just absolute missiles up and down the field. Looks fantastic. I mean, if he had been able to play like this all season and that team had kind of been healthy, they would have probably been legit contenders to not just win the division, but Stafford could have been a legit MVP candidate. That's how well he's been playing over the last month of the season. So very cool to see. They've kind of, I don't know, I don't necessarily want to jinx it, but I feel like they've kind of locked themselves into a playoff spot given how they've played and kind of how some teams around them have fallen off over the last couple of weeks, whether that's Minnesota or Green Bay or whoever. It feels like they've kind of locked themselves in, should be the 6th seed. And, couple of the teams that they might face in the playoffs are teams that we've talked about recently as struggling on defense, whether that's Philly or Detroit, even Dallas to an extent. So those teams, if you have a struggling defense, this is not a Rams offense that you really want to be playing right now when they're at 100% and they're playing kind of lights out right now with Sean McVay, continuing to do a great job calling plays. So Very interested to see what they do rest of the year. Gonna have to eat some crow on them a little bit. I had talked about them at the beginning of the season as, a nice bet to maybe have the first overall pick this year. That's not looking so good right now, but shout out to them for, you know, doing what they've done despite having, not elite talent, especially on defense. So very cool to see them performing so well.
Well, and it's definitely, like you said, the contributions from these playmakers like Puka Nakua, like him coming out of nowhere,
Hmm.
obviously helped their ability as an offense continue to make strides and make gains. But we've obviously touched on this a number of times this year. Kyron Williams is the engine that makes this thing go here. When he is cooking and he's getting his touches and working in with the offense, it's really, really hard to dedicate the attention to that run game and get beat behind them like they have been frequently. That's how the Rams have gotten their chunk yardage, and that's how they score these points. They're roughly in the 30-point range pretty much every game. So this is a good thing to see that they can take care of business. Unfortunately, though, you'd hope to see a little bit better outing from their defense, in terms of that fourth quarter 15-point outburst that you really shouldn't expect from the Saints offense that really hasn't been pressing anybody this year. So that's going to be something to watch moving forward because obviously, you know, with Aaron Donald in the middle of that defense, it dedicates a lot of attention to him. These other guys need to make some plays and make things happen. So that will be something that we have to see as they get into some of these potential playoff matchups, like we just talked about. So that'll be what's most interesting moving forward, absolutely, in terms of how their spreads look against these bigger teams come playoff time, which I'm not gonna lie, I think that odds makers are gonna end up gifting them way too many points, and they're gonna end up being a value more weeks than not.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so that heads us into our slate for the week. And the first game on that slate is maybe not the most exciting game out there, but it is a good money making opportunity. This is a game that you're picking in on. And actually, I like where your head's at too with this one. We have the Colts heading into Atlanta to take on the Falcons. The Falcons, 2.5-point favorites at home. Game total for this one roughly about 45 points, depending on where you shop. V, I know which way you're leaning with this one, but why don't you go ahead and break down which side you're taking on the action in this one?
Yep, definitely gonna take the Colts and the points in this game. Pretty surprised that they are underdogs in this game against an Atlanta team that just lost to the Panthers. If you lose to the Panthers, I don't think you should ever be allowed to be favorites the following week. It's just not how this works. That was an abysmal performance. You only give up 9 points and you still somehow lose that football game. Atlanta team is disaster. But let's start with the good. Let's start with the Colts and what they've done recently. Gardner Minshew and that offense have been really good the last few weeks. They've won 5 of their last 6 games. Minshew in that span has 7 passing touchdowns and just 3 interceptions. So doing a very good job taking care of the ball. He's averaging 225 passing yards per game and completing 63% of his passes in that 6 game span. The Colts have scored 27 or more points in 4 of those 6 games. Atlanta now switching quarterbacks once again, moving off of Desmond Ritter for the second time this year to Taylor Heineke after Ritter blew that game last week. I'm only a little bit bitter as I had the Falcons -3 last week. If Ritter doesn't throw that pick, that should be a pretty solid cover. But he just couldn't help himself. So now we go to Taylor Heineke. He has started 2 games this year. The Falcons lost both of those games. Heineke, wasn't bad, but he wasn't great in those games. He had 2 passing touchdowns and an interception in those games. I think the big thing in this game is there's a massive coaching disparity between these two teams. Shane Steichen is probably one of the favorites for coaches of the year for this season. He has done a fantastic job with that offense despite having so many injuries. I mean, it feels like forever ago that, Anthony Richardson was the talk of the town in Indy, but he goes down. He's missed so much time that I think a lot of people forget that he's even on the team and he's their franchise quarterback. But the coaching staff has done such a good job with Minshew under center. They lost Jonathan Taylor for quite a bit of time, having to rely on Zach Moss. Whereas you have Arthur Smith on the other side, who has been handed all of this talent where there's Kyle Pitts, Drake London, Bijan Robinson, and he seems like he's getting the least out of all of that talent, whereas Shane Steichen is getting the most out of such little talent. So definitely a huge coaching disparity in this one. Michael Pittman should be playing in this one despite taking the big hit last week against Pittsburgh, and Jonathan Taylor is also expected to return from his injury. So it looks like the Colts are full go in their skill position. So I think just a big advantage overall for the Colts in this one, whether it's talent on the field or coaching staff wise. So definitely like the Colts plus 2.5.
And we live in the universe where Shane Steichen is the guy that made Zach Moss truthers right. And
Yep.
also the same universe where Arthur Smith can't figure out what to do with all those offensive weapons. It's honestly a treat to watch fans of the Falcons just kind of implode every single week watching that operation go down. It's tough to watch, and I can understand where their anger lies, because it is honestly frustrating. Everything that Arthur Smith has been given in terms of being an offensive play caller has not really helped him. They have a lot of young weapons. They continue to throw kind of questionable play calling into the mix, and they're just not getting the most out of what that offense was able to do well last year. It's been a continuing theme for them. They have games where, granted, last week there was a ton of rain. It was a weird game. But you have games that end in 9-7.
You
You
know what you
have
do when there's heavy rain? You probably give your bell cow back, a lot of touches. I don't know what they were doing, but that's not what they did.
right, exactly. So that just goes to reinforce the point that a lot of questionable decision making over there. I wouldn't be surprised to see a different name in the head coaching seat for that team next year. But as far as this one goes, 2.5 points. I think we talked about this. The Colts lines every single week are kind of questionable. They tend to swing in their favor, away from their favor, often in almost every single week. So I'm right there with you as being extremely surprised to see this line being anywhere around that 3 mark. I thought it would be much closer to a pick 'em or even a -1 for the Colts. Now, I think the inclination for odds makers is that Gardner Minshew can be turnover prone, but as you've highlighted, that hasn't been the case in his recent trends. He's actually making great decisions with the football, uh, bar some, head scratching plays, but those are kind of just his MO at this point. But he is still making good plays with the football and really pushing the ball down the field, which is what you want to see from these guys. So many of these guys, especially guys that maybe come off the bench at some point, like Minshew has, don't often have that aggressive nature. Just look at what you've gotten from, you know, Atlanta. They continue to have to go back and forth because guys just either A, don't know how to push the ball down the field or make boneheaded decisions. And there's no in between for them. And that's why they continue to have to go back and forth, which is a questionable decision for me if I was sitting in that chair, but I'm not. Uh, Other people that are paid much higher than I am are paid to make those decisions, and that's for them to do. But there's a lot of decisions to be made, and for them to be 2.5 point favorites just does not make sense at this point in time. So I'm right there with you.
Yep.
The next game we have on the list, I think, can actually be a low key a pretty good one. So
Yeah.
Seattle heads into Tennessee, and Seattle's 3 point favorites here, which is understandable given kind of how well they have been able to play as of recent. But man, this is a key injury game, and I'm not necessarily in on the spread exactly, but I really like the game total here at 41.5. Injuries, like I said, play a big role in this. It's going to be something that we have to watch moving forward to kind of diagnose how much value you can get out of this. Seattle has a ton of key injuries. Geno, while he feels better, they're going to be without Jamal Adams. Julian Love did not practice all week. Devin Witherspoon questionable after not practicing all week, and Kenny Walker was questionable with just a limited participant on Friday. That could help lead to a pretty pass heavy game, especially the Kenny Walker injury. Every time they've been without him, they are 2 of the 3 times they've been without him, they've had 40 or more dropbacks. So you know what they want to try to do. They don't try to force a square peg in a round hole. If their bell cow back's not there, they know where their offensive production is going to come from, and that's on the outside in this passing game. And when you look at Tennessee, they have a ton of key injuries too. Jeffrey Simmons, again, injured. This is something we've talked about for a while, but they're also going to be without Sean Murphy Bunting. That's the best cornerback on their team. That is troublesome because when you talk about what they're going to be looking at corner on the outside, they have a pair of undrafted young, either first or second year corners on the outside. They have Trey Avery, who has a 49.9 coverage grade right now. That's 102nd out of 118 qualifying corners. And you have Eric Garrer. I don't know if I said that right because I'm not sure that I've ever heard of the guy. Shout out to him for getting his name in the highlight. He's 5'7" and 175 pounds.
Oof.
That is a troublesome size when you're saying that he's going to have to match up potentially with a guy like DK Metcalf, who I think is a great target in this game when you look at his line at a pretty modest 67.5 receiving yards and at plus 165 anytime touchdown. Those are a great value considering the matchups that he's going to be getting on the outside. Now, Roger McCreary is still in that secondary, but he primarily plays out of the slot, and they're just not going to move DK into the slot for that matchup to take any pressure off of other people. They're going to continue to eat and target these guys on the outside, and it's going to be a long day for them, unfortunately. And I think when it's all said and done, DK is going to have a ton of work and a ton of usage in this one. And when you look at the other side, so 41.5 isn't so low that you're like, oh, Seattle could definitely get this all by themselves. You're going to need a little bit of help from Tennessee. But when we go into what Tennessee is, Will Levis questionable with an ankle. That's been the question around them all week. But that's not a huge issue. If they have to go to Ryan Tannehill for a possible start, I get that we want to clown on what Ryan Tannehill and this Tennessee team was doing before Will Levis. I mean, he frankly wasn't all of the problem. Yes, 2 touchdowns to 6 interceptions, but he had 9 big time throws, 7 turnover worthy plays. So it's not like he was massively as the differential there. 9 big time throws, pushing the ball down the field. He had a 71.3 PFF pass grade. I think that they can amount to 13, 14, in that range to help put this one over. And I think Seattle can really carry the load here, especially with how well they've played. And we have to talk specifically about how well they played against the Eagles last week. Now 20-17, not the highest scoring game, but an impressive, demonstration of what they can do offensively against a team with a pretty good pass rush. Now their secondary is obviously fairly suspect, so those questions remain. But I was very impressed with their outing. When you see this matchup on paper, what immediately stands out for you in this one?
Yeah, I definitely feel like this could be like a low key shootout coming up in this game. This could be, one of the higher scoring games, at least of the early slate. I just feel like both offenses have that potential. They just don't necessarily always come out. We saw a couple of weeks ago on Monday night that this Tennessee team, when that offense is clicking, they just have playmakers, whether it's DeAndre Hopkins, whether it's Derrick Henry, whether it's Tyjae Spears, their rookie. It's just a weird situation though. Like whenever they're dogs, it seems like they come and play well, but as soon as they're favorites, even though it's against a terrible or not, I mean like Houston team without their starting quarterback, they just completely shit the bed. So it's tough to see it. But in this game, when they're a full 3.5 point underdog, it feels like this is a spot where you're going to see Tennessee possibly come out and kind of guns a blazing. So would not be surprised to see this become a bit of a shootout. You're totally right though in terms of injuries being key thing to monitor in this one. If those guys in that Seattle secondary are going to not play or not be at 100%, over makes a ton of sense. I'm going to be eyeing the 3.5 potentially as a play this week just because I feel like too many points. The Seattle team has not proven that they can consistently win or consistently cover numbers that big. Their defense has, they played well last week, but, the week before that, they got torched by the 49ers. Week before that, they gave up 35 to Dallas. So this is a Seattle defense that even when they have guys out there have not been playing totally well. So definitely could see the over, definitely could see the Titans covering the 3.5 in this one.
Yeah, and this is in general when you think about just rules of thumb when you are betting. If you get that hook and they're at home too, that's just an added value to this at the 3.5. Even though the Titans might not be the most impressive team on paper, They did play the Dolphins very well in that game in prime time. Seattle also has a pretty good game on their resume. Like you said, sneaky shootout potential. And when you do that at 3.5 at home, there is some potential value there. So something to monitor moving forward. Absolutely. And I'm right there with you. I think that this one could end up being a pretty good game in the early window. The next game in the early window, unfortunately, isn't going to be quite as interesting due to some injury issues. We really hope to see CJ Stroud back as soon as possible. But we have Cleveland as 3-point favorites heading into Houston. Game total for this one is 40 total points. I like where your head was at with this one too when we were going over it. But why don't you break down what you're IDing as the value on this matchup?
Yeah, I got this one at Cleveland -2.5. And I also like the under 40 in this one. I think the line has moved up half a point because it was officially ruled earlier today that CJ Stroud will be out again. I think there was still a little bit of question mark with that one. So because he was officially ruled out earlier today, I think that this line has moved up half a point. But like it at -2.5. I mean, you just have to start with Joe Flacco. I mean, the guy's been awesome. I don't know where this came from. He's just been, straight off the couch right into the games. 3 starts so far this year, and he's putting up, pretty big time numbers. 7 passing touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and is averaging 313 passing yards per game. That's pretty incredible for, again, a guy who was not playing for the last year and a half. Um, Houston has gonna start Case Keenum again this week with CJ Stroud out. Keenum did not look good last week, especially early on. They could not move the ball at all, and he had a really bad pick 6 against the Titans last week. Houston's defense played really well, so they kind of bailed them out and gave the Texans some time to overcome their offensive issues. And near the end of the game and overtime, they were able to put together a couple drives. But overall, you really cannot trust this Keenum-led Houston offense, especially when they're getting less than 3 points in this one. Cleveland's defense has been, maybe not as stellar as it was earlier in the year, especially in terms of allowing quite a few points in recent weeks, whether that was against Jacksonville or the Rams in the last couple of weeks. But usually when they are giving up all these points, it's coming against competent quarterback play, which is definitely not going to be the case in this one again with Case Keenum starting. One thing Cleveland's defense is still doing pretty well is rush defense. Which has gotten better the last couple of weeks. They have allowed a total of 150 rushing yards over the last 2 weeks against the Jacksonville Jaguars and Chicago Bears. If this Houston offense is not going to be able to run the ball with Devin Singletary, then they're going to have to rely solely on Case Keenum. And again, that's just not going to work out well for them. It's going to be a long day if they can't run the ball in this one. So definitely like Cleveland -2.5 there, but also like the under 40 in this one. Cleveland's offensive line is riddled with injuries. They're having backups and third stringers play all across that line. We saw them get beat up pretty badly last week against the Bears defensive line, and I think Houston's front seven can also have a pretty strong showing in this one, even without Will Anderson. I think they still have some good players up front, including guys like Sheldon Rankins and others who can create pressure. This Houston defense has allowed less than 20 points in 3 of their last 5 games. So I think, given we have Case Keenum starting on one side and given some of the injuries that Cleveland is facing on their offensive line, I think this should be a relatively low scoring game, this one. So give me the under 40 points.
No, Joe Flacco, Case Keenum. That's the Broncos ex-quarterback shootout, baby. What do you
Oh my
mean?
goodness. Are these guys in the Broncos Hall of Fame?
The
Ring of
Ring of Fame.
Honor
That's
quarterbacks?
right. That's right. No, I'm right there with you, though. I completely agree. And you said it there at the end. You touched on Will Anderson also slated to miss this one. So that is kind of a tough blow for this Texans defense that is fairly young, does have some good playmakers on it, but he was kind of the foundational piece to that. He was getting a ton of pressure right now, really, really playing well. So I am right there with you. That is a tough look, but that's also not the end of the world because Cleveland's offensive line is all patchwork right now. But it's just a question of really Joe Flacco has played very well in his role, even with their limitations as an offense, which we haven't really seen from this Browns team at all this season until Flacco came about. They covered their last 2, won them both outright, were, played tough games against Denver and the Rams. But frankly, like you said, That's competent quarterback play. They're not going to come against that this week. It's going to be an uphill battle for the Texans. So I am right there with you. And it's a tough look because this is a nice young Texans team. And while they might, finish out much lower than they had hoped, given how well they'd played, they have a lot to be proud of. And they're going to be a team to absolutely watch heading into next season. And they're probably going to be a heavily, heavily shopped team in the offseason for win totals and such. So as soon as numbers like that drop, we'll be all over it. We'll give you our opinions on that. You could get into our Discord to get more updates on that. Go to importantnonsense.com to become a member. That's how you get into our Discord. So shameless plug with that. But yeah, so I think that that's going to be something that's worth shopping as we head into the offseason. And I agree. If we can get it at -2.5, like you said, it's moved a little bit because of the news with CJ Stroud definitely missing this one. But if you can get it at 2.5 instead of 3, absolutely do it. It's going to make a world of difference for you
We
for sure.
saw last week the push value that Cleveland has at 3. It's tough for them to cover that full mark again just because of some of the injuries they're dealing with. So if you can get it below the 3, definitely the play to make there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The next game on the slate, we usually don't have too many games in the later slate, but we have a good pick in each of them. So the first one on here, we have Jacksonville heading into Tampa to take on the Buccaneers. Tampa, 1-point favorites at home. Game total on this one about 41.5 to 42 points. You are liking the game total here, V. You are headed in the over territory on that. Tell us what you're thinking on why you see this one ending up in some more scoring than I think some would indicate, especially odds makers, given how it's 42 is a fairly modest line for sure.
Yeah, definitely a modest line, and I think first reason I like the over in this one is you just have to start with what Tampa Bay has done on offense over the last 2 weeks. They have been fantastic offensively, scoring a total of 63 points in their last 2 games. Baker has been absolutely fantastic, 7 total touchdowns in his last 2, 6 passing, 1 rushing. He completely torched Green Bay last week. They had no answers for him, 4 touchdowns up and down the field, could not slow him down. So I think he has an opportunity to continue the hot streak this week against Jacksonville. Their defense has continued to struggle recently. They have allowed 21 or more points in 5 of their last 6 games. They have 1 or fewer takeaways in 4 of those 6 games. So this is a team that is not slowing down opponents. They're not taking the ball away. They're not, building off some of the things we saw earlier in the year when we were praising their pass rush and praising some of the things that defense was doing. Those kind of things have slowed down a bit for this defense, unfortunately, which has definitely caused a lot of problems for them. On the flip side, Tampa Bay's defense has not been great either. They've allowed 20 or more points in 4 of their last 5. I think both offenses should, be able to reach 20 points relatively easily. I know I said the same thing last week in the Jacksonville-Baltimore game. That didn't quite work out. Jacksonville's offense unfortunately stalled a bunch of times, missed a couple field goals, which really, slowed them down. Trevor Lawrence had a really bad fumble heading into Baltimore's red zone in that game. So a lot of things went wrong for Jacksonville's offense to prevent that over from hitting. Hopefully they can do a better job finishing drives and, taking care of the ball. If they're able to do that in this one, I think, should be an easy over. In my opinion, I think both teams can hit 20 points in this one. So yeah, definitely like the over 41.5 here.
Yeah, and another thing that needs to be said too, with Trevor Lawrence in this week, I know that there's been a lot of speculation on if he's going to be playing. That obviously remains to be seen with his injury. So that's something that you need to monitor moving forward. But that does also present opportunity when you look at the actual line. Right now, with it being at 1, I still think that's a fairly decent line if
Yep.
Trevor were to play. So you could even get in on that on something like right now and wait on the news. If he is to miss this week, that's probably going to move closer to 2, even maybe 2.5. And then you have a lot of value there from that line movement. So this is definitely one that we want to monitor moving into Saturday as the injury reports kind of become more solidified. But I agree. And Tampa Bay, Baker's impressive. Baker is
Yeah.
a gamer. He just sometimes makes it happen, and he might not be the quarterback with all the tools in the bag. And Frankly, I don't think he's going to be ever the type of quarterback that we're like, they have Baker Mayfield on their side. They're always a potential to win or put up huge points. But when Baker is hot and he is feeling it, he does tend to play really aggressive football, push the ball down the field, and push windows you don't always see him throwing into. And that's a good thing when you have the targets that he has. So this is another opportunity. We've talked about this Jags secondary for a while. This is another opportunity to target them with guys like Chris Godwin, with guys like Mike Evans. Go
Yep.
in, look at some of their yardage lines, shop those. You
Once
will get
again, reading my mind for a couple of my plays this
right,
weekend.
exactly.
Love it.
So go in there, shop them out. I was gonna tease that we're probably gonna have some prop picks from this game in the Discord. So
Yep.
of course, shout out to V for that. But yeah, so this is definitely an opportunity there that we would love and makes a lot of sense. And Jacksonville has a lot of questions right now. I don't know any other way to put it.
Yeah.
They really have things to answer. So that's
Yeah,
something
they're
that they're gonna have to do.
not a lot to win this division anymore, especially with the Indy rolling the way that they've been playing. Jacksonville has beat them twice this year, so they do have the tiebreaker. But if Indy wins out, Jacksonville loses a game here or there, it's going to be tough sledding for them. And also for Tampa Bay, do not be surprised if they win a playoff game. I mean, right now, I think they're in line to play Philly in that 4-5 game. And given how Philly's secondary is looking right now, Tampa Bay has a legit chance to win a playoff game, which is pretty crazy. If we had said that a couple of weeks ago, most people would have thought we were crazy for even just suggesting they could make the playoffs. But man, looking good. Things
Oh.
can change quickly out here.
The South is just another beast entirely.
Yeah,
And, if anybody has to win it, I at least kind of hope it's Tampa Bay, given how well they've played. So
yeah. And don't give us any more New Orleans or whoever the other team was. I can't even remember.
I
Whoever
think,
they are,
yeah,
don't give this to them.
so close. All right. And then, of course, we have to touch on Dallas at Miami.
Yep.
You knew we were going to. This has to be up there, game of the week. Um, Miami 1.5 point favorites at home. Game total on this one 50.5 points, depending on where you're shopping. I know that I'm still monitoring this game. I know we're going to monitor this game more as we move closer to kickoff. We're probably going to have more picks for this one, but I love where you're heading with this one. So I'll let you break it down here. Where are you seeing the value in this heavyweight matchup, V?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the over 50 in this game. This is a battle of the top two offenses in the league in terms of points scored. Miami is first, Dallas is second. We all saw what happened last week in Buffalo. Dallas's defense got absolutely torched on the ground last week. I know it was probably tough for you to watch as you had the Cowboys plus the 2.5. But that was just a crazy performance by the Bills rushing attack just up and down the field with James Cook. Now you have to play a Miami offense that is top 5 in rushing. We have seen what they can do when Raheem Mostert and Devin Achane get going. It's just completely unstoppable when those two rushers get a full head of speed and just, they can, get chunks of 20, 30, 40 rushing yards seemingly whenever they want. So if Dallas has not figured out what went wrong last week in their rush defense, I think it's going to be another long day for that defense. And this one, Miami, again, ranks first in points scored. They have scored 27 or more in 4 straight games. Dallas struggled last week offensively, not a good showing for them. But again, they are second in points scored. They have scored 33 or more in 5 of their last 6. Their defense, though, is questionable. Like we said, they have allowed 31 or more in 2 of their last 3. Miami's offense should be back to full strength. I think Tyreek Hill is expected to play, but definitely still worth monitoring. For Miami's defense, Javon Holland and Xavier Howard are questionable, so also something to keep an eye out if they are out or not at 100%. I think it could be a tough day for Miami's defense as well. I would expect Dallas to kind of, go back to the drawing board and figure out what went wrong last week. I would be pretty surprised if they had poor showing offensively 2 weeks in a row. I think they just have too much talent on that side of the ball to allow that to happen again. So, you know, when you have the two top scoring offenses and the totals only set at 50, tough to do anything but take the over in this one.
Yeah, and it only makes so much sense. And the big questions about this one has to be those injuries for Miami.
Mhm.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. Tyreek Hill's availability. I know they were talking about Achan's availability potentially. I know that he ended up becoming, I think, a full participant late in the
Yeah, I
week.
think they listed him good to go today. Him and Teron Armstead
Okay.
on their offensive line were both
So,
listed as good to go for them.
So that's an obvious plus for them because, like you just said, the Dallas rushing defense looked so bad. And I was there clutching my pearls, watching my money go down the drain very early in that game last week.
Yeah.
And frankly, there's questions behind that. And this is not the team you want to see after having something like that happen. I do like leaning towards Miami in this one at the -1.5, especially if Tyreek Hill is able to go. But those questions around Devon Holland are definitely need to be answered because he has been so fantastic
Yeah.
for that back end of that secondary, which is a big reason why this defense has been so good. Their secondary plays well. They're able to get to the passer with 4 on their pass rush because the secondary plays so well, and it puts their offense into positive positions. I think that if it's just hard to lean away from, frankly, how poor the Dallas defense was last week to think that
Mhm.
they can really right the ship fully to take down an opponent like Miami is capable of putting out. So this is going to be one worth watching. 50.5 points is an extreme value on this one because I think if we were to talk this line through, you could potentially see it anywhere up into the 52 range or
If
the
we didn't get
53
that
range.
performance from Dallas last week, what would this line be? I think a lot of the reason this line is as low as it is in terms of the total is because of what we saw offensively from Dallas a week ago.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. It only makes sense because these are two of the top scoring offenses in the league. Traditionally, when games go like that, we've talked about that a few times this year. You can see these game total lines go up into that 53 range. We've seen it
Mhm.
a number of times this year. So to get this one at 50 is a pretty good value. I think you'd probably want to get on this one earlier at 50 as I would imagine the public money will probably push it up a little bit higher as we get closer to kickoff, especially as the morning window games come winding down and the later
And as the
slate comes
injury
through.
stuff comes out, I think that's a great advice. Definitely get on this one early if you can.
Exactly. Exactly. And then the next game we have in the late slate, not necessarily the most interesting game, but man,
Weird
it is.
game for an afternoon slate game. Weird game.
I know, and it's gonna be magical for anybody who just loves disgusting, dirty defensive football. Go out and watch this game because this is the one that is gonna be nice to really show off to a lot of people who haven't realized how good this Bears defense has been because they don't get to watch them that often in the early
Mhm.
window. This Bears defense has been spectacular. And this is going to be the key matchup for that one, the Chicago defense against this Arizona offense. Now, I understand when you go and look at the trends, and I'm the trends guy, the Cards have gone over in 3 of their last 5, and that's all since Kyler's return. But 2 of those came because the defense was absolutely horrendous and they allowed 35 plus to the Rams in San Francisco. So, with that being said, they've only scored roughly 21.6 points per game. That's good for them considering how porous they were and inefficient they were for the first 2/3 of the season. That's obviously a positive run for them, but they're coming up against an opponent that is just taking the ball away at a high clip. The Bears have only allowed 1 over since the start of November. That's 3 games under 30 points total scored out of their last 6. So that's pretty impressive. 12 interceptions over that span. That's the most in the NFL. Last week they had 3 against Joe Flacco, and we've talked about how good Joe Flacco has been. He ended up making some of the plays that they needed to end up winning the game, but this defense made his life really hard, forced those 3 interceptions. Kyler Murray last week himself had 4 turnover worthy plays against San Francisco. I think a value here is if you go in and shop interception lines, Kyler Murray to throw an interception to this defense right now is a value at just minus 122 over on FanDuel. You could shop around and try to find it a better place. I really don't know that you would, because if you are getting this line elsewhere, I would imagine it's probably closer to like minus 180, because he was not very good with the ball. He, being Kyler Murray, was not very good with the ball last week. And this Bears defense has a nose for the football, especially in that secondary. And the injury report kind of turned in their favor in that secondary. Everybody looks to be good to go. They were worried that some guys might miss due to some questionable, just late season injury business, but they're all good to go. And this Bears defense has allowed just 14.3 points per game over their last three. That's the fourth best in the NFL right now. They've only had 2 home games since the start of November. This will be the third, and they've only allowed 13 points in each of them. So with all of that being said, under at 43 points is the only thing that makes sense. I would have expected this line to be much, much lower. I'm not sure where a 40 over 40 game comes from how these teams have played. I think maybe oddsmakers might be expecting Justin Fields to get something going against this Cardinals defense. And to be fair, sure, but it's not like they've done a lot offensively either. To pretty much everybody that's not Detroit, they haven't been able to score over 20 points against since the start of November. And in all those games that aren't against Detroit, they've also only been able to score one or fewer touchdowns in 2 of them. So it's just not a huge thing for them right now. They have a lot of questions offensively. Last week, just 236 yards of total offense, and obviously the heartbreaking drop of the Hail Mary that everybody seems to be talking about. So you're not going to run into situations too much like that, but I think it just goes to show they really are struggling offensively while their defense is putting them into excellent positions. So even with short fields, it's not really equating to a ton of points. I don't see a way that this one can end up over 43. And frankly, I just love the fact that Kyler Murray is probably going to cough up an interception right here. It's going to be the easiest minus 122 you'll ever get. So, V, with this matchup and your Bears, is there anything else that I might have missed in this one?
I think you made a lot of good points there. I think if people are on your side on this one, I think another interesting play could be the under on the team total for Arizona, based on where this total is for the game and where the spread is. I'm guessing the team total for Arizona is going to be around 19 or 20 points. So if based on what you said, if you don't feel they're going to be able to even get to 13, 14 points, probably a pretty good play there on the team total under for Arizona. Another big thing for the Chicago Bears defense is how good they are at stopping the run. They've really shut down opposing rushing attacks very well. Cleveland did absolutely nothing on the ground last week with Kareem Hunt and Jerome Ford. So if James Conner isn't able to do much and you have to rely solely on that passing attack, could be another solid day for this Bears defense. I think there's still some injuries with Arizona's pass catchers with Hollywood Brown, and I'm not sure if Rondell Moore is full go. We'll have to see on that. Michael Wilson. I think their primary target in this one is Trey McBride, the rookie tight end. He has been fantastic, but him alone is probably not going to be able to really get it done for this Arizona offense. Be very curious to see how Chicago's defense handles a dynamic athlete like Kyler Murray, because if you look at just some of the quarterbacks they played recently, not a ton of athleticism that they had to go up against, whether that was Jared Goff a couple times, old man Flacco last week, Josh Dobbs, Bryce Young, not super athletic quarterback they've had to play recently. So I'll be very curious to see if Kyler can do anything to like break their containment and kind of make some off scripted plays. That'll be, the key for them if they want to pull this one out. So under makes sense. I would probably stay away from the spread in this one. Bears, like we talked about it with who did we talk about earlier before? Atlanta. You just can't be a big favorite like that when you're not, playing super well. Chicago being a more than a 3-point favorite in this one. It's tough. It's tough. I mean, we've seen them blow so many games over the past few weeks. So probably stay away from the spread on this one, but the under makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Especially at 4.5, it's just a little too rich for my blood.
Yeah.
If you were to get that one closer to 3, or even the 2.5, you definitely have something that you could talk about.
Yeah.
Obviously, we love getting past those key numbers. And at 4, we talk about this. When you get into this no man's land of 4-5, you are really asking the team to win by a touchdown, just in less words. So I agree. I think that given the offensive struggles from the Bears, it would make some sense to take the under. Well, obviously the under in the game, but given the defensive capabilities of the Bears and kind of, the questions on the Cardinals, especially with their offensive playmakers, the under on their team total makes a ton of sense too. I think 43 is just so high for this game. It just does not make any sense to me.
And we don't know what the weather's gonna be. This is outdoors in Chicago in late
In
December.
this late December,
It could be a
yeah.
tough one out there.
Yeah. So far, the weather didn't look terribly crazy in most games, but that obviously changes on a
Yeah.
dime here in December and especially in Chicago. So we'll have to monitor that one moving forward. In
Yep.
the last game we have on the slate. So this is just a little teaser from the Christmas Day slate. We're going to probably have more picks for all of these games on Christmas Day in the Discord. So obviously become a member over at importantnonsense.com. That's how you get into our Discord. You can ask us about any of the games that we are looking at this week, or even any of the games that you're looking at this week. We will break them down. And that's how you're going to get our Christmas Day lineup. But the first taste of this one here, we have Baltimore heading into San Francisco, 5.5 or 6-point favorites for the San Francisco 49ers. Game total on this one, about 47 points. Oh, man. I don't know. I don't know what else to say of this one. This is
That's
such
a
a good
crazy line.
matchup, but
Yeah.
this is an incredibly odd line for me. And it really just comes down to you don't see teams that are this good, 11-3, 11-3, two of the best against the spread teams in league, take spreads that are this high. This one has moved up to 6 points. I took it at 5.5, and I will be happy to take it at 6. I just don't see how odds makers could give a team like Baltimore 5.5 points. I get that they're traveling. I get that San Francisco is one of the hottest teams in the NFL right now, but Baltimore is absolutely no slouch, and 5.5 is just too many points. When you talk about what Baltimore's been able to do this year, they are the highest against the spread record, tied for the highest against the spread record in the league, 9-5. Their against the spread margin this year is plus 6.5 points, almost a full touchdown. And that's the highest in the NFL. As a dog this year, they've only been a dog once. They're 1-0. That came back in week 2 at Cincinnati. And on the road this year against the spread, they're 5-2. So none of the trends really go this way that looks like they should be getting more points than maybe a traditional 3 or 3 and a hook, which is what I would expect something for a game like this. And also, when you look at the injury report, now I could understand at first the Ravens were looking to potentially be without OBJ and Zay Flowers. Ronnie Stanley was limited in practice. But as of Friday, they were all full practice, Friday being today. We'll have to see if they have any setbacks in tomorrow's practice, but everything looks to be good and going. They're going to get both their targets back, their left tackle. So they're looking good. On the other side, San Francisco potentially could be without Eric Armstead, who was a DNP Thursday and Friday. He's had some injury issues leading up into this week also. So that's not a huge loss for San Francisco, as they have more pass rushers than any team I think you could even imagine. They look like a Madden connected franchise in terms of pass rushers, but that could still be, a tough blow to them. But frankly, this is the biggest key for me right here. In the last 3 home games for San Francisco, they have failed to cover all of them.
Mm.
Now, with that being said, a pair of them were large spread games of 13, 12.5 points, and they came pretty close and just didn't cover in the end. But this is a pretty big spread as well for a team significantly better than the checks notes, than the Rams, Browns, and oh wait, no. not the Rams and Browns, the Seahawks, Bucks, and Bengals. So, with that all being said, I think that this is just way too many points. The Ravens, they're a potent offense. They can make things happen quickly. Obviously, a huge matchup here is the Niners pass rush versus Lamar Jackson and his ability to make things happen off script. I think when it comes down to it, he's more equipped to handle a pass rush like this than other guys with his mobility, with his ability to make plays on the move. I think I just like it way too much here. And I think once the public starts getting in on this, I don't know how this keeps moving towards 7. V, what's your indication of this game? Explain something to me how this line can get to the way that it did.
Oh man, this is super interesting. This is probably the most intriguing line we've seen this year, and honestly, I don't know which way to go on this one. Um, so obviously we know what San Fran can do when they're fully healthy. They just kind of steamroll people. Unbelievable showing again last week. Purdy was great, but a lot of open players on the field. I think really this one might come down to Baltimore's defense matching up, pretty well against this San Francisco offense. They have guys kind of on all three levels who can play well. Justin Madubuike has been a revelation on that defensive line for Baltimore. You have a guy like Roquan Smith in the middle who has the speed and instinct to cover up Christian McCaffrey potentially. Then you have guys in the secondary who are very solid players. Kyle Hamilton, Geno Stone are nice ball hawk safeties who can kind of prevent some of those big plays down the field. Though they're sure tacklers, so you're not going to have some of these Debo Samuel broken tackles that go for 70 yards after the catch because you just can't wrap the guy up. So I think this defense, matches up, better than most other defenses in the league against the Niners. On the flip side, this is a offense and this is a Lamar Jackson led offense that just doesn't really get beat down like that. They can always have some answers to whatever you're throwing. They can make things happen. I think losing Keaton Mitchell definitely does hurt just because that element of speed is really big. You need to have those fast guys if you want to beat this San Francisco defense. So I think the rushing attack is going to take a bit of a hit. Gus Edwards has not been very efficient. You're probably have to bring back Justice Hill, or you're going to have to rely a lot on Lamar creating, which hasn't been a huge part of their offense probably this season. You haven't seen some of those big highlight runs, more just like when you need it, bailout type plays. So it's going to be interesting. And then this game is really going to come down to Lamar's passing ability against this 49ers defense. And if he can continue to make things happen, you can definitely see them covering this game and, even winning this game. They're definitely good enough to win this game outright. I would probably, again, just stay away. This is a very, very difficult one. You could definitely see this one going either way. But, game is in San Fran. Should be clear conditions on the West Coast. Should make for a pretty solid game. It's tough. I don't know which way to lean on, either the spread or the total, but it should be a really, really good one to watch.
This is the Christmas present game for sure. Thank you,
Yes.
NFL. For all the complaining we do of primetime matchups, thank you for this one. This should definitely be a good one. And yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. A big question too has to be how well the San Francisco offense plays against a higher level defense. This Ravens
Mhm.
defense is absolutely stacked with players at every single position, both linebackers, both safeties, the whole cornerback core. Everybody is very, very good at what they do. So this will be a really good one to watch, and I can't wait to see it go down. Even if you don't bet on this one, it's just going to be good to watch. But I think you got some value there in the Ravens. So that
Yep.
does it for us this week. We have wrapped up 16 weeks in the book. This is incredible. And we're doing it all the way through the playoffs. So if anybody is not following us on all of the socials, make sure you go do that. Follow our YouTube, Nonsense FF. Follow our Twitter, Nonsense FF. Follow our Twitch, Nonsense FF. We really, really appreciate that. And you can also, like I've said, become a member, importantnonsense.com. That's how you get into our Discord. You can ask us all your betting questions or any of the guys. If you're still, kicking in fantasy football, you can ask any of the guys the fantasy football questions in there. We love that. And of course, if you want to support us at all, you can get IN merch from the website, promo code LOCK. We really appreciate that if you do, and any support. And V, that about does it for the week. You have any parting words for the folks at home?
I feel like you're throwing a little bit of shade at me for not making it past the first round in my leagues this year in fantasy football. So that's tough to hear. But yeah, it was a great show this weekend. Hopefully, you guys learned a lot and are going to tag along with some of these plays. It should be a fantastic football weekend. Sorry, NBA, your time on Christmas this year has been eaten up by the NFL. So we'll see you next year. So I think Christmas is on a Wednesday. So maybe you'll fare better next year. But this year, all about football on Christmas. So hopefully everybody enjoys.
V, don't give Roger Goodell any ideas to do a Wednesday night football next year. And you are right.
Depends on who's playing. Depends on who's playing, right?
And you're right, V. I was taking a direct shot at you in your fantasy prowess this year. No, I'm just kidding. In our dynasty league, I'm pretty sure I got dead last. So, anyway, until next time, everybody, good night and good luck.